before a helicopter sweeps low over Escoda Shoal as wooden bunkers queue for fuel that decides whether families eat this week or turn back empty. At dawn, near Bajo de Masinloc and Escoda, Philippine Coast Guard and BFAR crews pushed toward nearly 100 fishing boats with 98,000 liters of fuel, 5 tons of ice, and stacks of food packs, while Chinese Coast Guard and Maritime Militia shadow every mile. Why press on? Because each drum buys another day at sea, each bag of ice saves a catch from spoiling, and each transfer quietly asserts rights in waters affirmed by law but contested on the horizon. Step aboard as maps light up, deck calls crackle, and lifelines move hand to hand under pressure and surveillance. This is how livelihoods hold in the West Philippine Sea. Before sunrise, the sea is a sheet of dark steel, and the first engines already hum. Philippine Coast Guard crews advancing in formation with BFAR support toward clusters of wooden bunkers near Bajo de Masinloc and Escoda Shoal, where the silhouettes of larger ships linger like watchful eyes at the horizon line. The plan is simple but risky. Deliver lifelines, fuel drums, crushed ice, food packs, fast enough and far enough that small crews can fish another week, despite the pressure that tightens with every nautical mile from the coast. A radio crackles with a warning about live fire activity ahead, and above Escoda, a helicopter dips low and veers off, a reminder that this water is both livelihood and chessboard in the same breath. On deck, gloved hands pass blue drums, the smell of diesel mixing with salt and brine. Officers count and recount each transfer: 98,000 liters of fuel, 5 tons of ice, hundreds of relief bundles. Numbers that sound abstract in a briefing, but on this deck translate to time and hope made tangible. Even now, shadows move, a Chinese hull at medium distance, a second one further out, and other metal shapes without names marking presence by simply being there. Still, crews work. Pump, hoist, balance, pass. The sun lifts on water that looks almost peaceful. Almost. This is what happened in early October. A two-pronged operation, one arm running toward Bajo de Masinloc, the other toward Escoda, designed to split attention while maximizing reach to scattered Filipino fishers who remain in contested waters out of necessity, habit, and right. At 5 a.m., both thrust lines push into the chop, rendezvous points set, radio protocols tight, hand signals rehearsed to muscle memory. By first light, crews engage dozens of fishing boats, some tucked close to the shoal, others drifting further afield, moving aid in a choreographed relay that treats time like an adversary and distance like a tax to be paid in patience. The goal isn't just a number, it's endurance. More fuel means an extra night on the grounds. More ice means fish that reaches market fresh, not spoiled. Food packs mean calories enough to brave a weather turn or a longer detour to avoid an encounter. By day's end, nearly 100 boats have been resupplied, and downstream procurement stands ready to absorb catches at fairer prices. A quiet lever against volatility that starts on the deck and ends at the market scale. Around the shoals, it feels like working inside a living diagram. Philippine vessels, names familiar to anyone who follows these waters, form moving islands of logistics, while counts of nearby foreign ships fluctuate: Coast Guard cutters, militia boats in loose formation, the occasional military platform. At one point, reports log 7 China Coast Guard vessels and 10 militia around Bajo de Masinloc. Escoda sees 8 CCG units and 9 militia, an encircling presence felt even when unspoken. A gravitational field tugging at judgment and course lines. The risk is psychological as much as physical. Shadowing erodes confidence, turning routine maneuvers into calculations about proximity and intent. And yet, the transfers continue because they matter. A drum emptied into a banker tank is a day's range returned. A sack of ice is a haul's value preserved. A grocery pack is one less compromise when fuel prices or weather turn cruel. Listen closely. And the sea tells older stories that shape the present. Fishers speak of horns that muscle through, of speedboats carving arcs to force a change in heading, of near-miss geometry that doesn't make the news because the wake subsides. The boat rights itself and nobody was struck this time. Shadowing itself becomes a tactic of erosion. Shaving minutes from a set, nudging a crew to leave a school, pushing a captain to call the day early. In portside canteens, the talk returns to costs. Fuel climbs, margins thin, and a single failed trip ripples through a household and then a village. That's why drums on deck mean what they mean. Every litre extends a trip by a calculable segment. Every bag of ice increases the probability that a fish lands fresh and marketable. The lifeline isn't rhetorical, it is measurable, in hours at sea and pesos earned against the odds. On a chart, it looks straightforward. A Philippine exclusive economic zone, clearly drawn, within which the state enjoys sovereign rights to resources under the law of the sea. In practice, that law meets weather, steel, and will. A 2016 tribunal found no legal basis for expansive historic claims that cut across these waters, narrowing what could be asserted and clarifying what remains within a coastal state's reach. It distinguished rocks from islands, and by extension, what features generate maritime zones, without settling land sovereignty or drawing every boundary. Out here, that ruling becomes more than a document. It's the quiet, stubborn rationale behind a resupply run. The line in an officer's brief that says, "Proceed because rights here are not theoretical. Proceed because people live by this sea." The October surge drew cameras as well as cutters. Footage captured the elongated dance, Philippine crews working while Chinese ships maintained proximity, news teams stitching together angles that, in some, reveal a particular atmosphere. Workaday logistics in the foreground, the geometry of intimidation in the background. Short clips show aid bags lifted across rails as captions tick off counts, fuel, ice, food, while anchors narrate routes and vessels involved. The images have become familiar, but repetition is part of the tactic. Presence normalizes, documentation deters, and each mission builds a temporal wall around a routine others would squeeze from view. It's harder to erase what the public sees and catalogues. Hazards remain that statistics cannot soften. A helicopter skims low, a warning broadcasts, a hull drifts closer than comfort allows. Memory retains other chapters, collisions, scrapes, the wakes that cut too close, and crews who flinch when engines rev near their beam. Confidence is fragile at sea. Risk compounds invisibly until one lurch becomes a story retold for months in mess lines and family kitchens. That's why logistics has become strategy. Fuel is more than fuel. It's the difference between turning back at dusk and holding into the night run when catch rises. Ice is not just preservation, it's dignity in a market that punishes delay. Resupply is not a photo op, it's the mobilization of resilience measured in miles sailed and catches saved. Missions also whisper to markets. When agencies commit to procure catch downstream, they steady a hand that might otherwise tremble on the throttle. If fish can be sold with less fear of a slump, staying an extra day feels less like a gamble. Aid, purchase, and patrol form a triptych. Support the crew, buy the product, show the flag. Together they fight the entropy introduced by harassment and uncertainty. The arithmetic fits on a napkin. More liters, more miles, more ice, more value, more presence, fewer forced detours. But to make that arithmetic real, someone must lift the drum, pass the bag, and stand on the bow, watching the horizon for shapes that alter plans. Beyond the rails, statements cycle through capitals. Some reaffirm the ruling, others reject it. Analysts forecast friction seasons rather than sudden thaws. Legal lines hold in communiques even as steel hulls test them at sea. For crews on deck, this is context, not comfort. Work does not pause for a press release. Time is measured in fuel flow and daylight, not in diplomatic calendars. Still, messaging matters. It creates a windbreak, justification for persistence, rallying for support, sometimes deterrence at the margins, enough to help a mission proceed when the horizon feels crowded. What follows will look like what just happened, because persistence does not ask permission. There will be more resupply runs, sometimes quiet, sometimes filmed from 3 angles, each threaded with the same choreography of passing drums and careful navigation. Crews will refine routes, tighten formations, share notes on where shadowing feels most acute. Fishers will swap coordinates and advice, where water's been good, where it's not worth the trouble, where it's safer to wait an hour before approaching buoys. Every trip adds a page to an unwritten manual of survival that sits alongside the law, how to live under pressure without yielding to it. Beneath the maps and measurements is a human chorus. A father who learned to read water from his father now teaches a daughter to gauge wind off the bowline, to tell a safe wake from a dangerous one by the shape of foam, to hear what a radio voice means as well as what it says. A crewman with an old scar from a bad year runs a hand along a fresh drum, jokes about the weight, silently counting the days that cylinder buys. On another deck, a young captain sets his jaw as a siren wails far off, checks position and keeps the throttle steady. These are small acts, and the sea is built from small acts. By late afternoon, the light turns gold and harsh, and the day's work is both etched and incomplete. Some crews peel homeward, tanks fuller than they arrived, ice chests heavy, radios busy with offloading plans. Others set for the night, choosing to fish now that the calculus has shifted in their favor. Behind them, shapes on the horizon do not disappear, but their meaning blurs for a moment, displaced by the immediate demands of gear, bait, and tide. On the larger vessels, logs are updated, tallies checked, courses plotted for the return leg. On the smaller boats, someone laughs about a near spill, someone mends a net, someone says a quiet prayer into the wind. Dusk arrives with a lesson that grows clearer the longer one pays attention. This is not a spectacle, it is a routine, contested from outside but sustained from within. The drama is incidental, the intention is ordinary. Aid and engines, nets and ice, hands and ropes. Headlines focus on shadowing because conflict photographs better than continuity. But the heart of the story is endurance. A state can uphold rights with ships and documents, but only people can uphold livelihoods with courage and work. That is why these missions matter. They convert abstract rights into practical possibility, one past drum at a time. Night at sea is terror and comfort. Distances lengthen, sounds change. Radar gives shape where eyes cannot. The helicopter does not return. The radio quiets. Somewhere a family waits for a message. Somewhere a market readies for morning shipment. Somewhere a policymaker drafts a sentence to be passed 10 ways by dawn. On deck, rhythm settles. A thermos passes between hands. Someone hums. The sea smells like fish and metal and cold. The lights of a resupply ship blink steady. An ordinary miracle. In the end, the sentence is simple. Despite shadowing and warnings, crews delivered fuel, ice and food so that small boats could keep working their own waters. It is not triumphant, but it is true. And truth is what endures when the horizon is crowded. Tomorrow will require the same sentence, written again in motion and weight and patience. The map will not change overnight. The law will not change overnight. The sea remains, and those who know it best will meet it with the tools they have and the courage they carry. That is enough for tonight. That is enough to begin again at dawn. If this story reflects the grit of the Philippines, from deckhands to coast guardians, stand with them today. Hit like to boost Filipino fisher voices, share to keep the spotlight on our West Philippine Sea, and subscribe to help push more Philippine stories, ingenuity and courage into the global feed. Leave a message of support for our crews and communities below. Let's flood this comment section with para sa Pilipinas, and keep morale high for every boat that chooses dignity over fear.